Welcome to Advocation X, episode number 46. Time for a newsworthy Canadian broadcast. A special thanks and hello from Clyde and the crew to all of you beautiful thinking people out there. And a special note of gratitude goes out to our very first sponsor, Baden Optical, located in beautiful Ontario, Canada. Before we continue, please help further our cause by hitting the like button and subscribing for future content. Become a member and crush the bell while you're at it so you miss nothing. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to become a sponsor as well. Huge disclaimer, ours is an opinion channel but is based on facts and not the alternative type either. Questions will be answered if you're a subscribed member of this channel. However, suggestions are more than welcome, including your critical analysis. So topics I'm going to tackle here and now. Leading the charge, 5G, East Coast Massacre, how's your curve? Ontario father fined, Quebec men fined, Andrew Scheer. So let me attempt to unpack this right now. In Nova Scotia, Canada, the East Coast Massacre that left Heidi Stevenson, an RCMP officer and mother of two, deceased after the antics of Gabrielle Wortman, whose name I hope I will never mention again. He executed approximately 19 Nova Scotian loving souls, family members and friends, due to some crazy scheme he had been cooking up for some time. The shooter, who is one of the deceased, had modified a vehicle to appear as an official RCMP vehicle and also procured a uniform that would help him pass off as such. So, all in all, a senseless and barbaric act that will leave so many people grieving loved ones behind. We pray for strength and solace for those who will be suffering for years to come because of this senseless act. But as Canadians, we will gather together and help each other through this horrible circumstance, regardless of whether we can gather in person or not. I'd like to move on to Andrew Scheer. He's holding up Parliament for reasons unknown. As it seems, the ruling party, along with other opposition parties, have signed on to one session per week and other variables to keep themselves and everyone else safe. For some reason, Andrew knows better than everyone else and wishes to delay and change the opinion of every other party that is already signed on. Could this be just obstructionist tactics, or is there a real valid reason for requesting changes to the schedule? Leave your opinion in the comments and in the appropriate section, and I may quote you in subsequent videos. Now, moving on to Quebec, we have two men there fined for failing to adhere to social distancing. The fine amount was in excess of $1,400, $1,600, somewhere in that vicinity. These men were loading a motorcycle to send off for service. In the process of finding these two men, there were pictures taken of the police officers themselves not wearing masks and actually being extremely close to one another, one officer leaning in the window towards the other officer while they were having their conversations. Yet, operating a service for the repair of a motorcycle, I thought was actually good enough to be able to be in a closer proximity. You have to offer a service, get it done safely, get the motorcycle out of there. But for some reason, they were fined. So what do you think of this action? Was it a just action, or was it based on something else? I'd love to hear your opinions down in the comment section. Moving into Ontario, there was another father fined for taking his children for some rollerblading exercise that led them through a parking lot that was empty and devoid of all other humans. They were a family which, by the regulations, were allowed to be within the 6 feet from one another since they all live in the same household. The first words from the father that got the bylaw officer upset was when he said, "Who are we hurting? We're just a family rollerblading. The bylaw officer's response was, so we're going to be like that? And then starts issuing fines. Now, of course, I'm not quoting, I'm just paraphrasing, trying to give the feel of the gist of what had gone on there. So, was this also just? Was it a just way of handling this family? Or do you think something else was at play? Could he have gotten a warning? He's there with his children. Anyways, moving on. Leading the charge in this fight against our super bad cold illness are us Canadians in the Western world. We have put measures in place in a much more timely fashion than many of our fellow nations. We have put aid programs in place in advance of many other of our fellow nations. Canadians have always risen to the occasion when adversity strikes. This seems to be no different occasion. As Canadians, let us continue to lead the way in positive progress that can be emulated across the world community. Shout out to all of you essential workers who have stood up and stood the test of time and kept us all under your protective wing. I'd like to move into a very controversial subject right now. 5G. 5G towers have been going up all over the world, and largely without the consent of the actual public or the residential inhabitants of those areas. So there are quite a few questions that need to be answered before everybody just throws up their hands and says, go ahead. But it seems they're going ahead anyway. So who knows which direction this will take. When we look to Dr. Harris, who was instrumental in warning our governmental officials about the dangers of acid rain years and years ago, and turned out to be right, joins a conglomerate of Ontario and Canadian medical and scientific professionals to once again approach the dangers of this new scourge that is coming to our shores. Actually, it's here. It's just coming stronger and more widespread. She was right about acid rain and now warns of the 5G effects of these radio waves and the health risks that will come from them. She warns of vague symptoms which would include headache, fatigue, concentration, insomnia, tinnitus, and irritability. She warns that these symptoms will continue to rise as the 5G installations are pushed ahead by those in corporate power with a stranglehold on our politicians. Some of the symptoms that may come from 5G, and some studies done in the past with other forms of microwave activity, show that the body's response can also be to block oxygen absorption into the bloodstream, which would, if severe enough, result in asphyxiation, which could look very much like a type of pneumonia. With a body's reaction to microwaves rushing through its cells, possibly cause a heating up response that could be seen as perhaps a high fever, an extended period fever. With the aluminum that has been included in the chemtrails that were sprayed regularly for years now, that apparently are sprayed in order to reflect the sun's rays back into space and slow the warming of the planet. Then, of course, becoming absorbed into our bodies through our vegetation eaten and the animals that are cultivated to become meals on our dinner tables. Could this possibly, coupled together with the radiation of 5G resonating through our cells, heat the aluminum and allow our bodies to sustain much greater damage than 5G alone? Is it possible that 5G could mimic the conditions of a flu? Could the damage in our cells and possibly to our joints cause the muscle pains and aches that would simulate a flu? Where are the 5G towers in your area? Could they possibly be everywhere? Take a drive through very affluent areas and see if you spot any 5G towers close to those homes. If there are none to be found, then you have found your answers. Be sure to send me any information that you may have on this subject. I will be sure to include everything I can in future videos. So, as usual, please leave respectful comments. Don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe for growing content. Become a member. Crush that bell while you're at it so you miss nothing. And once again, good folks, I must say, we never give up and we never give in. But remember, we must always keep an open mind because knowledge is power. So, do your research. Regain your power. And until next time, thank you for spending time with us here on this channel. Please stay safe and healthy while doing your very best to remain happy as humanly possible. And here is where we will mention future sponsors, like our very first sponsor, Baden Optical in beautiful Ontario, Canada. Until next time.